Welcome back to Playing with Pam. Today we're going to be starting on that t-shirt quilt that I mentioned in the previous video. And for our first little workshop here, the semi-workshop I guess, or mini workshop you might want to call it, I want to go over the supplies you're going to need for your t-shirt quilt. So let's see, so I basically have them all here, well except that you obviously need a sewing machine and the thread that goes into it, and you'll need an iron and an ironing board and some sort of a clean cloth to use on top of your t-shirts when you're pressing them down. You can even just use old t-shirts for that, but I don't have those pictured here, but obviously you'll need those. Some other important things you're going to need, let's see, I have a cutting board here, just a standard quilting cutting board. You can use other types of cutting boards, I guess, whatever you happen to have around, but that's to protect your cutting surface. I also have a rotary cutter, which is not essential to doing this type of quilting, but it's really handy to have. I have a pair of scissors, a bunch of needles, and probably the most important piece of equipment I can recommend is something like this square plastic ruler. What this is, a 15.5-inch square plastic ruler, and it happens to have grids. Have a grid on it, which is really helpful for positioning your t-shirts when you're wanting to make sure that you cut it out and capture the image the way that you want it to be captured. You can buy these in pretty much, I think, any quilting store or craft supply store. I think I got this one on Amazon, but I can't exactly remember. But I would look for something that's around 15.5 inches. I tried making an earlier quilt using a smaller ruler. I had a 12.5-inch square ruler, and the squares just came out too small. And when I say too small, they looked fine when you put them all together, but believe it or not, the weird part was when you had to fold it up, it didn't fold properly. And when I have a couple of t-shirt quilts in my house, and I like to fold them up with one of the t-shirts showing on the front, and I couldn't do it with the tinier squares. So anyway, I would recommend something about a 15.5-inch, maybe a 16-inch or something like that in terms of a ruler. If you don't want to invest in this, it was about, I think, $15 or something like that. You could also cut a template out of a piece of cardboard, I guess, or a piece of plexiglass. You could even, I've seen some people use like plastic square placemats, and it doesn't even have to be square, it could be rectangular, but I find it easier in terms of putting stuff together so you don't mess up that it be square. And some people just simply use a ruler, you could do that too, but the quickest and by far easiest thing to do and to have is, again, one of these square rulers with a grid on it. That's pretty much all of the equipment you need. Now, in terms of the materials that you're going to need, obviously you're going to need a stash of t-shirts, and for this quilt we're going to be using 16 t-shirts. You may want to get a few extras just in case you either mess up or decide you don't like the t-shirt you purchased, but 16 is what we'll be using for this quilt. You also will want to get some fusible web. Now, I know there's quite a few people who make these t-shirt quilts that don't use this, and in fact my very first one I didn't use it and it came out fine, but I have found that it does really make things quite a bit easier. It's, the pros and cons. The pros are it's much easier to cut your t-shirts out because the material is really stretchy for a t-shirt. It's also much easier to sew them together so they don't kind of slide around. On the negative side, though, it will make your t-shirt quilt a little bit stiffer and a little bit heavier. It's going to add a little bit of cost to your quilt, and of course it'll add a little bit of time to attach the fusible interface onto your t-shirts. But in the end, I think it's probably worth it. But that's what we're going to be doing in this particular t-shirt quilt, I think. I could change my mind between now and then, but that's what I think I'm going to do. If you do go and buy fusible interfacing, make sure you get the thinnest kind you can and make sure it is iron-on. Yeah, so keep those two things in mind. And then the last thing you're going to need is some sort of a batting, or a backing, not batting. In fact, you don't need batting for this type of a quilt. That's why it's so fun and easy to make. But you will need some kind of a backing, and I would recommend just fleece is great. That's what I'm going to be using for mine. It's inexpensive, relatively inexpensive. Some people use like micro fleece. Some people use, you know, some other stuff. But you do want it to be soft and snuggly, and fleece will provide that for you. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of materials and supplies. The next thing I'm going to be talking about will be how to pick the perfect t-shirts for your quilt. So join me next time, and I'll see you soon. Bye.